for your Christmas music. A little more variety there. We're going to move right along now and get to our first guest. And our first guest today is a Native American who has actually been nominated for many awards and just picked off at least one major award at the Native American Music Awards. And she'll be here to tell us about it in just a little bit. Her name is Shon Denay, and this is a track by her called Come Back, featuring Brian Richard. Here's Shon Denay.
Did you really think that I was gonna lose? You crazy. Oh, you see, why you sitting here with a sad face? Is it 'cause you can't deny I'm a savage? Oh, you better recognize and get with it, or you're just a stepping stone in the way. Who's the crybaby now, boy? You had to try for the crown, boy. Now you're down for the count, boy. I'm not quitting, I'ma get it. Come back, come back.
I'm on a mission, so I'm coming with it.
Come back, come back. This is a, come back.
I'm on a mission, so I'm coming with it.
It's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how quickly you get back up. Oh, you will see. Tried to change the game, but so just keep on counting the ways that you make it for me once. It won't be a casualties are lost, but still I'm ready. Now who's the talk of the town, boy? Who took control of the crowd, boy? Now pick your mouth up off the ground, boy. I'm not quitting, I'ma get it. Come back, come back.
I'm on a mission, so I'm coming with it.
Come back, come back. This is a, come back.
I'm on a mission, so I'm coming with it.
I had like no show, no growth. Let the pen fall asleep on the page, and I find my way to the maze. Like me over so bad, like how the hell is she still standing? Beat. I'm just trying to find a word by my destiny. Rapping, I trapping, I biking, I having a beat. In either way that we never can feel it. We sector the silly and cross me, and I'ma show T. I keep it real. You see the bottom, but makes the camera look easy. 2018, oh my, believe me, I'm the one. No one. I'm the one. B-R-E-R.
He's the king.
Yo, I'm not the one to pretend. Here, next level shit can't hang. Here, I got the juice and power. Trip collection of the world's hours. I got the juice and power. Trip collection of the world's hours. I got the juice and power. Trip collection of the world's hours.
Come back. This is a, come back.
I'm on a mission, so I'm coming with it.
Come back. He's the king. Come back.
This is a.
Come back.
I'm on a mission, so I'm coming with it.
He's the king. She's the queen. He's the king. She's the queen. He's the king. She's the queen. He's the king.
I'm on a mission, so I'm coming with it.
And that's Come Back from Shon Denay. And Shon is here to see us and talk with us. Shon, hello.
Hello, everybody. Shon Denay here.
Glad to have
that.
I really did, and we'll talk about that in a minute because I'm really beyond impressed. I'm really kind of taken aback by the sound you have. We're glad to have you here with us today, and
wow.
In going over notes about you and what you do musically, I come up with words they use to describe your music, and they use everything from cabaret, which is a term that goes back, even predates John and I, and we consider ourselves dinosaurs, but also quiet storm, vocal jazz, and raw neo-soul. You really got a blend of sounds there, and unlike some music, you can actually pick out these sounds. You don't just say, well, maybe that part was influenced by whatever, cabaret or whatever, or that's jazz. I mean, you can actually pick those parts out of the music. So my first question to you is, how did you achieve this sound?
Wow. Mainly, that's a great question, how I achieved the sound. It mainly began from just listening to 90s R&B. Honestly, SWV, Brian McKnight, and then going to church choir from there, just singing a lot in my room, and Disney musicals.
Well, that's a pretty good cross section there. I know everyone,
right.
all artists convey to different extents the influences that they've had in their lifetime. So that part isn't surprising. What surprises me is how you manage to make them all come through so that a first-time listener can pick it up. I mean, the first time I heard Come Back, I'm saying to myself, wow, that part, that's kind of jazz. I mean, that's something I'd expect to hear in a jazz club, and then the next thing I know, I'm listening to an R&B, a contemporary R&B theme fitting in there, and it all just blends together. And when I speak of your background, I want to bring out the fact that I know from what I've read that you are part Oglala Lakota Sioux and part African American, correct?
Correct. I sure am.
So you'll be drawing from both sides of that spectrum, of course, and that's not surprising. Again, as I said, the surprising part is that you can do it and make it so visible yet seamlessly melted together. John Bon Jovial, step in here. Your thoughts?
Well, you've just, Shon, you've and Dave, you've pretty much started the question that I wanted to ask, and that, of course, is your cultural roots of Native American and African American, and of course you're looking at two very strong cultural influences. And
yes.
Do you have a way of keeping them from conflicting with each other, or do you find that conflict helps you with your creative process?
Interesting question.
That was a great question. Well, with my father's roots of being African American, I got my vocal talent from him and his side of his family. But with my mother's side, the Native side, storytelling became really natural for me. I was a poet for quite some time, had some poetry published in magazines and a book called Under the Quicksilver Moon. I almost made it as a runner-up. But that part was more easy than the singing part. I had to get over my fear of presenting my own music to the world. It was easy to do karaoke, for sure. That is still my favorite pastime. Love karaoke. But to be able to say, hey, world, this is me. These are my stories, and also stories from friends. There were times when I'd have writer's block, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what should I write about? So I became a great listener to other people's stories and found ways to portray them through my music, just to kind of get people to relate for the most part. These problems that I go through are what a lot of people go through as well, even beyond being Native American or African American.
Do you find
They're
that
relatable.
Do you find that the confluence of the two cultures are pretty big shoes to fill, and that you've got kind of the responsibility on your end of keeping the cultures alive?
Oh, absolutely. It is terrifying in a sense. But the good thing about this situation is that I have a different look. I'm more of an urban Native American. I wasn't raised on the reservation, but I have family that was, so I'm able to relate to what's going on with their matters of life, as well as being a city native. And then in regards to being African American, it's sometimes people can be a little apprehensive with getting to learn a culture that they aren't experienced to on a day-to-day, and I would like to be that bridge in a sense to open up conversations or any questions that they might have. And so I feel like my music is a great way to kind of be the bridge.
I can see that, yes. I can see where it would be. Now, obviously, obviously Mom and Dad have bridged any gaps that might have existed at one time or another there. How does how does their influence, because obviously there can be a little push-pull in your mind, or at least when you started, how did their influences come together to influence you? I mean, obviously, even if you did, you don't anymore. Obviously, you don't have this feeling that, my music has to sound one way or has to sound another. But how do their influences come together to help you create what you do?
Yeah. Every Sunday morning when we were growing up, my father would always play jazz when we were cleaning.
There's the jazz influence.
There's the jazz influence.
I like your dad already. That's great.
Right. As soon as we heard the music, we're like, oh, it's time to clean. Oh, no. So for my father, the jazz and the funk, that's where that came into play. But for my mother's side, we would do a lot of Native American programs, our community outreach out here in Las Vegas, to where I started getting into the poetry. There's a poet called Howard Rayner, who was a very big Native American poet that he had a program for, and I was able to find my love into storytelling through that. Now, my mother, she was murdered back in 1997, so I kind of lost a lot of.
I'm sorry.
I know it's an interesting story. It's sad, but because of that, it pushed me in the direction of finally getting the strength to make my stories, and so eventually her story can be known.
Sure.
Right now, the California Innocence Project is trying to take the case of the guy who murdered our mother. And afterwards, once we spoke with them, they kind of told us that the ball was rolling a little too much, so they can't stop it with him, which sounds ridiculous to me.
Yeah,
so that gave me even more strength to try to get my story out there and eventually get hers out there so I can have strength in numbers. When it's time for him to be.
That's kind of a strange statement. I wouldn't know what to draw from that statement. But my sincere condolences to you and your father, and that had to be a real challenge for you. And where you are now as a person, as well as as an artist, where do you see yourself going from here?
From here, with winning the Native American Music Award, it actually opened up a lot more opportunities with collabing with well-known Native American artists. It kind of snowballed, honestly, to something bigger than what I expected originally. I just wanted to put out good music.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and get the story out, and now it's nice because I can now be a voice for someone, for more than just my mother.
How about your dad? What's his reaction to your music?
My father, he wants